Hello and welcome to our special session, India Reviving and Accelerating Budget 2022, presented by IT's knowledge partner of Budget 2022, MBG Corporate Services. I'm your host, Pallavi. As India's economy shows signs of recovery during these difficult times, Budget 2022 has set the wheels in motion with an array of announcements. On this platform, our eminent panelists will share their insights and key takeaways from this year's budget. Today's webinar aims to highlight the policies and reforms for business sectors in future. To kickstart the session, I would first like to introduce our special guest, Mr. Subhash Chandra Garg, author and former Finance and Economic Affairs Secretary, Government of India. He has recently announced his debut book named The $10 Trillion Dream, which explores the critical policy issues that India faces today and suggests the reforms for it to become a US $10 trillion economy by mid-2030. Let's hear his keynote address on Budget 2022 and how it will propel strengths and opportunities for the industry sector.
Thank you very much for inviting me to deliver this keynote address today. This is a fantastic audience. Budget was presented recently, as all of you know. The setting was a little difficult this time. In certain respects, it was very good. The government's tax revenues were buoyant. There was about 3 lakh crores extra tax revenues, which was projected to come for the year 21-22 over the budgeted estimate. So that was a kind of bonanza, if one can put it that way. But there was some headwinds as well. The Disinvestment Program was not doing that great. The government revised the estimates from 1.75 lakh crores to about 78,000 crores. On the expenditure side, there was also certain extra commitments which the government had to take. More importantly, in the food subsidy segment, fertilizer subsidies, as well as in the employment program, NREGA. That accounted for about 2 lakh crores of extra expenditure. The government also successfully privatized Air India, but that had left a large bill. So about 60,000 crores were required to be set aside for taking over the debt liabilities of the Air India. So with all these things done, the 21-22 budget was more or less matched with extra revenues taking care of the extra expenditure. The change in the economy was perceptible. 21-22, we saw India coming out reasonably well out of the pandemic-induced in a way, massive reduction in the growth in the year 2021. This year is likely to generate growth of about 9%, which will compensate for the previous year. The global economy has also recovered quite a lot, which gave wings to the exports of the country, so which did well. And the corporate sector sort of acquitted itself very well in the year. These were the positive factors, but there was very clear expected slowdown thanks to the global inflation. The Fed and the many of the Western countries are expected to tighten their monetary policies, withdraw the quantitative easing, and probably raise the interest rate. So that was the setting. Even in our country, thanks to very large debt which we have accumulated, the interest burden and other commitments were expected to go up next year. There is a general assessment that the worst of the COVID is over, but perhaps you don't know, and therefore there is to be certain kind of caution and certain kind of care which you need to take care of in the year to come. I think that was the setting in which the budget was presented. by the finance minister. There was also one more, I think, aspect of it. Last year, the government had announced a very major reform program in the form of the privatization of banks, insurance companies, certain PSUs like BPCL and others. And that program was expected to be carried forward. The government had also announced a massive monetization program for the last year in the budget of last year. That was also playing out. So there was an expectation that there would be a large policy content of the budget as well. So I think there was expectation that the budget would build on the tailwinds created by the revenue buoyancy, and would also take further the reform agenda. And then there was also expectations from the middle class about the kind of some tax reliefs, and also from the labor and the poor classes that there would be enhanced program for in the form of the employment kind of things like NREGA, etc., and some sort of job related assistance in the form of MSMEs, and for the labor which had lost jobs or had faced the job reduction or the wages reduction in the year which went by. So that was the setting. Finance minister delivered, I think, on the whole, a very reasonable, very sort of mature kind of budget. She did not go for excessive expansion of expenditures. She did not also over projected the revenues. A very conservative, balanced view was taken. There was also a feeling that the reform agenda, I'll come to that a little later. So budget is mostly all about the expenditures, revenues, and the resultant gap being met by the borrowings. This year's budget, that is 22-23, is about 39.4 lakh crores. For ease of reference, we can say it's about 40 lakh crores budget. The central budget, interestingly, has a lot of components which are not in a way productive expenditure for the time being. They are in a way represent the obligations of the past. The biggest item is the interest cost. So next year's budget at about 40 lakh crores is about 2 lakh crores higher than the 21-22 budget. But of the 2 lakh crores, roughly about 1.4 lakh crores is taken away by the interest alone. There are two more items which are not productive or which are not centers discretionary or expenditures over which the central government has control. These are the pensions, which are about 2.6-2.7 lakh crores, and some of the mandatory transfers which are required to be made to the states. The Finance Commission makes recommendations about the disaster relief grants and the local bodies grant, revenue gap grants, and the like. These are about 4 lakh crores. So if you take away the 9.5 lakh crores of the interest, about 2.5 lakh crores of pensions, and about 4 lakh crores of the mandatory transfers to the states, including 1 lakh crores of the loan, then you are left with only about 27 lakh crores as the center's expenditure. I divide them into three big buckets of expenditures. One is what I would term as the public goods and services, which is the primary obligation of the central government. For example, you have to secure the borders, expend on the defense to secure the country. Likewise, you also have to raise the paramilitary forces for internal sort of order and all. You have to spend on judiciary, constitutional machinery and all. This all kind of expenditures take away about 7 lakh crores. And of the 7 lakh crores, most is the defense and the paramilitary, which is about 5 lakh crores. That leaves the remaining expenditure for about 2 big activities, which one is the redistribution, which takes place in favor of poor. It is done in various ways. There are direct transfers like PM Kisan scheme. There are jobs related funding, for example, Narega. There are indirect funding, for example, health and education spend. These all together take away about 8 to 9 lakh crores of rupees as well. And then you have the big expenditure, which is for the people who are today's main audience. I think they are most concerned about that, and more related to that is what I call the growth-oriented expenditures, right? These are the expenditures the government incurs on promoting agriculture, promoting industry, promoting services, promoting infrastructure. So this expenditure, the largest component in this budget, was infrastructure. So about of 10 or 11 lakh crores, roughly about 50% is the expenditure on infrastructure. And that infrastructure expenditure, government largely spends and make a big focus on, number one, the road transport expenditure, the roads and highways. The other one is the railways expenditure. Then the government also incurs quite a lot of expenditure on metros and other related expenditure for the urban infrastructure. And finally, there is also a large expenditure on the communications, which is telecom and other telecommunication services. The budget was also, the high point of the budget was focused on this, that the capital expenditure is being raised from 5.5 lakh crores to about 7.5 lakh crores, recording an increase of about 34%. And that was the biggest selling point of the budget. A lot of attention was given, a lot of emphasis was given. I would suggest, because any expenditure on infrastructure is good for growth, for capital formation in the economy. But for that, there has to be a real expenditure. By the way, the central government incurs Capex in 2 big ways. One is through its own budget, by spending or by providing equity or debt or direct expenditures from the budget. And also there are very large PSUs in the central government. They also borrow and incur expenditure on infrastructure and building blocks. For example, just railways, take the railways. So railways receive about 1 to 1.25 lakh crores in different years from the budget, but railways also borrow and raise own resources about 1.5 lakh crores extra, and total expenditure would be somewhere in the range of about 2.6 lakh crores to 2.7 lakh crores. Likewise, on the road sector, the NHAI, which is the major agency for the government, there also the NHAI receives a lot of money from the budget, but NHAIs also raise money from the market and from banks and the LICs and other institutions to do it. Together, last year, for example, they spent about 1.4 lakh crores. Last year means the current year, which is still not finished, 21-22. Of that, about 65 or 70,000 crores came from the government, and the rest was raised by the NHAI itself. In this year's budget, there is a bit of a difference. The government said that we will meet the entire expenditure of NHAI, so something of the order of 1.4 lakh crores the entire amount is coming from the budget, and the NHI consequently will not be raising any funds from the market. This is perhaps mostly because the NHI has done up large debts of about 3.3 lakh crores or so, and its servicing of that debt alone cost about 25 to 30 lakh crores. And NHI has become financially weak. So if the expenditure from the budget substitutes the expenditure from the NHI's own resources, then there is no additionality in the budget. So my scrutiny of the budget told me that about 2 lakh crores of extra expenditure, which was projected, effectively is not there. About 90,000 crores is the transfer to the states, which is part of the state's expenditure. About 65-70,000 crore is substitution of NHI's borrowing, and another 40 or 45,000 crores is a substitution of the borrowings on internal resources of the BSNL. Government is providing 45,000 odd crores of rupees to BSNL as equity. So I would suggest that we in the industry take a little more somber view of the Capex which is coming from the budget, and then make our plan. In a way, it might be all right, because there is likelihood of now the financial markets in a way turning into a little tighter position, thanks to withdrawal of the foreign portfolio investors' flows, and the monetary policy sort of reversal in the West. That is going to raise pressure on the interest rates in the country and availability of. RBI also came up with its policy a couple of days back and has opted for the growth orientation by keeping the money supply very liberal, the accommodative stance continue, and they've also signaled that they will maintain a relatively low interest scenario. So it is in this setting that the budget will be executed. My own assessment is that the large borrowing program of total about 16 lakh odd crores, 1/4 of that gets funded from the small savings, but 11 to 12 lakh crores, which it leaves to be raised from market, is also a very large draft on the market. The states would also come up with another program of 10 to 11 lakh crores minimum, and that together is a very large call on the on the savings of the country or the banking system. And if the FPIs are not there to support, probably there would be a harder situation going forward for the industry in terms of raising money. Thanks to the measures taken by the RBI, there is a reduction in the effective bond yields, but I suspect that would be more temporary than long lasting, and we will see the year 22-23 more as a year where the money supply was tightened and the interest rates were a little higher than our comfort, which might affect the industry. In any case, industry is not investing in the traditional manufacturing. There are large opportunities which are there in 4 big segments, in my judgment. One, of course, is the infrastructure. The other one is this digital economy. There is a massive transformation going on about the digitalization of everything. There is also enormous opportunities coming up in what is known as the circular economy, or for the for renewable energy to sort of decarbonize the generation of electricity and energy, and in the services segment. So I think industry would do well to take advantages of the schemes in the budget, like PLI and the Make in India, and also some incentives for the services and all, and also rustle up its own investment in the areas which are sunrise areas. Coming back to the resources side, I think one issue which I would like to discuss today in this note is the disinvestment program. I would like you to remember that the government not only disinvests these days, but the government continues to invest as well. If you see the budget papers, there is about 3 lakh crores of equity in the loans which the government would be sort of making in the year to come, whereas government's expected receipts from the disinvestment is only about 65,000 crores. The biggest issue right now is the LIC, which is expected to sort of fill up the gap in the disinvestment revenues for the current year. The DHRP is out. It's a very well presented DHRP with everything disclosed in the risk factors and all. So I would suggest those to be read very carefully. I think there is big issue connected with the valuation of the LIC. So I think that should also be taken into account when the investors are persuaded to invest in the. I wish the IPO well, but I think it should be priced at levels where something is left on the table. To conclude our discussion today, I think the budget does well in putting most things transparently, cleaning up the off-budget borrowings, also presenting a reasonable, conservative, balanced kind of numbers for the, but it's perhaps is much less strong on the policy. There is not great sort of enthusiasm and clarity about the privatization program and all. And let us see all work together to make the budget work as best as it can in the next year. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for sharing your insights on the budget. I may now introduce our second keynote for the day, Mr. Mayur Batra, Executive Chairman and President, MBG Corporate Services. Mr. Batra has over 2 decades of experience in advising multinationals and Indian business enterprises on a spectrum of matters relating to foreign investment policy, cross-border transactions, tax controversy, foreign exchange control regulations, and corporate laws and business restructuring. He has helped clients which include hundreds of Fortune 500 companies across Middle East, Asia, and Europe region. He has received several awards and accolades.
Good afternoon to all viewers. Namaskar. I am really thankful to eminent panelists, Doyens of Industry, and ET team for jointly hosting this event with us and giving me an opportunity to share my insights on Union Budget 22-23. I will like you to have a perspective of the global environment in which we are at the moment. In last 2 years have been one of the most challenging years in history of last few decades, since probably World War II. It is most of economies shared worse performance than the Lehman shock of 2008, and we had real fears of going into long-term recession. In background of this, I will like you to analyze this year's budget and Indian economic macro and micro performance. India today, according to me, is transiting from a developing country to a mature, developed country, and it is a leader in technology, pharmaceuticals, services, and geopolitically, the world looks up to it. So this is one of the best times to be in India for all of us. Union Budget 2022-23, I will like to congratulate the government because of what they have done in last 2 years, and as well as their long-term vision for next 25 years of Indian economy. I am happy that government has made its effort to have a fine balance between long-term growth and immediate steps of subsidizing and helping the most needy and the farmers who've helped us revive our growth as an overall balancing act. World over in 2020, most of global economies grew negatively because of lockdowns and disruption of services and businesses. There was a sharp fall in tax revenues globally. This is as per international studies done by IMF, OECD, and World Bank. We in India at the moment have really shown our resilience in last 2 years, but had a V recovery, as well as our tax revenues are better, as announced by the finance minister, much better than pre-COVID levels even. So this shows that the economy is really reviving. The corporate incomes of most of listed and large unlisted entities are hitting the record levels, even much more than the pre-COVID. So Indian economy is a bright spot for rest of the world. You have to understand that in 2020, in midst of COVID, governments, central banks, they acted in a haste and did lot of bailouts, transfers of cash to their populations and so on globally, and did extended themselves fiscally maximum, borrowed in what is budget? It's a statement of income and it's a balance sheet and profit and loss of the government. So in 2020, when global economies were trying to fight out the impact of COVID, they had worse growths, falling tax revenues, which is incomes, and exceeding expenses by doing these bailouts and large mega schemes of encouraging their economies or supporting their populations. So in midst of all this, I believe next 2-3 years, global the resilience of global economies will be tested. India is likely to be on a winning side with its robust increasing tax revenues, its very good fiscal management compared to other major economies in the world, limited national debt compared to other global economies of the world, and fast recovery. It is going to be the fastest growing large economy in the world. So this brings a lot of cheer to me and a lot of optimism about future of India. I will like to tell you a few things, like India today has the 4th largest forex reserve. We have a booming foreign direct investment coming in. We have booming exports. We have merchant exports, booming export of services. We have in India booming inward remittances from non-residents, Indians world over. It's one of the largest in the world. Almost more in around $90 billion we receive from NRIs world over who trust in their economy and send it back home for businesses, investment, as well as to take care of their families and support it. So keeping all this in right perspective, I think the Indian economy is on right track. Our government is doing a very good job. Also, recovery world over, as expected by major multilateral agencies, is going to economic recovery is quite dependent on the vaccination of the population. What our nation has been able to establish of vaccinating more than 75% of our population, and we are talking about 1.4 billion people It's an amazing effort and an amazing forward-looking, you know, uh, empathy for taking care of your population, and it will have good economic impact, because how much we lose to sickness and death, how much skill development is affected by schools not being working physically, or colleges or universities not, or even medical schools, engineering colleges being on digital mode. So this is what India has established. We have showed utmost resilience. So my key takeaway is that in budget, there has been, India has demonstrated a V recovery. India has showed key resilience, and India has shown long-term vision for growth. And we are globally, compared to other major economies and developing countries, much better placed. Now I will talk about few things what makes me think that next 25 years as government's vision, or next decade, is going to be the India's decade. You have to see that our economy in beginning of this new millennium was around 450-60 billion dollars. We've become a $3 trillion economy. We've grown 6 times in next 20 years. So if we are talking about our economy becoming a 10 trillion or a $20 trillion economy, which is another 6 times in 10 to 20 years, it's a very achievable growth target which we are focusing on. It's based on our past track record. It's nothing we are talking in just without any vision or without any insight into it. Of course, what is most nice is increasing allocation to increasing capital allocation to infrastructure sector, which our government is trying to do. This is in a way great effort, because this will create long-term capabilities. This will improve efficiencies for even private businesses, besides improving the job opportunities. Second most important thing which I feel, which is a big step which our government is taken, is promoting the startup ecosystem in this country. From 5-6 years ago, where India was known just as an outsourcing, cost-cutting services economy, today we are one of the leading startup ecosystem economy, with one of the top 3 leading number of unicorns with more than $1 billion valuation startups in this country. We are opening and investing in research for private sector, for defense, for space technology, for artificial intelligence, blockchain. We are digitalizing every aspect of Indian life and governance and economy. So this is a major change which has come in last 4-5 years. Because when we talk about growing, even for example, manufacturing sector, what is manufacturing? It is based on 3 key concepts according to me. Manufacturing is based on either cheap labor, which is not a long-term sustainable solution, which China benefited, because of having cheaper labor. Now Bangladesh is benefiting because of cheaper labor than India. Or it is based on you evolving some new innovation or technology, or it is based on government incentives and markets, consumption story being there. Now, what is going to happen to India and Indian manufacturing sector? India wants to increase the share of manufacturing for job creation. Already engineering is here. If you see global large companies, they've outsourced the engineering, like the Boeings and the Airbuses, or the major IT mega giants. They have their engineering being done in India, but manufacturing is not there. So government is trying to help it by extending the PLI scheme, by trying to procure more in government procurement of defense, by encouraging new startups by tax benefits to them and extending it further, by encouraging large mega investments like the semiconductor industry or the electronics industry, where major ecosystem is required. Indian government is trying not to be the cheap labor outsourcing manufacturing country of the world, but country where, because of young demographics and demand and growing income levels, companies will invest to have an access to the market, and domestic manufacturing has more benefits as per government policy and encouragement, and probably through our ecosystem of innovation and startups, and we may have newer products being developed which may give us long-term technological advantage over the rest of the world, and we can be the future manufacturing and engineering hub of the world. We do no doubt Indian talent is global, whether education in terms of we being global leaders in most of large financial services companies, technology companies world over. Indian talent is already celebrated and recognized. Now that talent has to deliver in this country. Probably we can, with developing this ecosystem of startups, giving them fair opportunities, incentivizing companies to manufacture in India, giving tax benefit, trying to promote the quality of infrastructure better, making environment, lifestyle better in this country. All this is going to retain most of talent and reverse the brain drain, I believe, and we are going to be a huge global player in coming years. On price parity basis, we are already the third largest economy of the world. We will be the second largest economy in next 20 to 30 years of the world, I strongly believe, if not the first largest. We have the potential to be the first largest, but it is of course up to us, all citizens of this country, to contribute in our own way to achieve it. Now, coming back to budget, of course, I am more pleased by them giving 100-year Indian post-independence, kind of a vision. I am increased by them focusing on long-term investment in roads, railways, ports, logistics, airports, telecommunication, highway, mass transport, vast waterways, green energy, river linkages. I can continue talking about it. They are very good goals. They basically will help private sector directly growing in terms of supplying equipment, raw material, labor, contracting for these projects, which government has substantially going to do additional investment. Even they are helping the state governments do more investment in capital, projects. So this is a good news, and it's a substantial raise compared to the last year budget. At the same time, I'm so happy them providing enough money for various, putting money in hands of the bottom of pyramid of our population, whether it is farmers who will be benefited by MSP, there is a minimum income scheme, there is a NREGA. So all this have enough that addresses the demand side of the hinterland issue. So there is a fine balance in this budget on capital invest growth and income sustainability. Same way, the digital initiatives, especially for banking, for schools, for university. 2 years ago, who could have thought about study from home, not like only work from home? So this is a great initiative, and launch of 5G services and launch of India-wide broadband infrastructure, which the government is focusing on, and putting again capacity of semiconductors, which is a global shortage at the moment, improving the logistics, giving incentives in custom duty for import of raw material. All this is of course going to lead to much more efficient, much more transparent, and much more technology built country of the future. And access to education will surely improve going forward from here. India is also going to hugely benefit with supply chain challenges which global large corporates and manufacturers and even consumers and providers of service have faced in COVID times. A lot of companies are looking at having a more balanced supply chain with multiple sources, and India being a major consuming market with its large population and growing economy will have benefit of China plus one for a lot of manufacturing companies. So they are, there is in coming future, I see a bigger boom in the FDI inflows into India, into greenfield and brownfield projects, especially in the manufacturing sector. India, especially globally, as I said in the beginning, is trying to with digitalization and forward-looking policies, their removal of more than 4,000 antiquated compliances and legal requirements and laws, plus forward-looking changes in the bankruptcy code, making it a global asset liquidification platform for India registered entities, as well as forward-looking changes in the SEZ Act, digitalization of all land records all over India will surely also improve our ease of doing business. We'll have much more inflows from NRIs investing in real estate back home. So it is good news for all of us in terms of capital formation and growth for the future. So this, as an overall, is a very progressive budget. It, of course, next year's growth around, which is 2023, projected to be around 8%. This year's growth around 9% for a large $3 trillion economy. We are like adding a additional economy of a Thailand or a Pakistan every year by growing $300 billion. It's a lot of new money coming in, new consumption coming in. So it will have opportunity for each and every industry. Lastly, I will try to also touch briefly on few things which are very key and worth mentioning. Taxation, on clarity of taxation on cryptocurrency, as well as putting up a mechanism for own digital blockchain based currency by our central bank is a great step, because overall this budget's message was a stable tax regime. They have continued with whatever they have incentivized to manufacturing or startups, and they have also tried to improve the SEZ mechanism, and nothing else they've tinkered with much. So this is very good news, because for private investment, for foreign direct investment, for, restarting of capital formation post-COVID by private companies, a stable tax regime reduces uncertainty. Digitalization of tax regime improves on transparency and reduces the bureaucratic and red tapeism or uncertainty around tax assessments or tax litigation. So this is again a great step by government. They've only clarified about digital assets and cryptocurrency. Other than that, they've not tinkered much on the direct taxes side. Similarly, about indirect tax, only thing what they've tried to do is try to encourage import of raw material by reducing some duties on that side, or promotion of exports like the diamond and gold jewelry industry, which has been benefited by reduction in custom duties, meant for export further to global market, and it is a major exports for part of our merchant exports. So this is all all audience which I will like to say. I strongly believe that we will be one day in hopefully our lifetime, be a global powerhouse, a $30 trillion economy driving the global economic growth with our basics of good democracy, freedom of speech, forward-looking leadership, stable tax and regime, well-established independent judiciary. So our fundamentals, young demographics, increasing income, which will give a major boost, because as incomes will increase, it's human nature. As we have more money, we consume more and we consume better quality. So market is there. It's going to be there for years. Skill set of people are improving. It is the time to be in India. India is the bright spot of the world at the moment. Thank you very much all once again for your patient hearing. Thank you very much to MBG and ET team to give me this opportunity.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Batra. With this, let's move on to the second segment of the program. Before we start, let me take a few minutes to introduce our panelists to the audiences. Mr. Kenichi Ayukawa, Managing Director and CEO, Maruti Suzuki India Limited. In his career spreading over 4 decades, Mr. Ayukawa has handled several key assignments at Suzuki Motor Corporation, Japan, and its overseas operations. He has managed business profiles including HR, operations, and global marketing. Mr. Ayukawa has served as director on the board of Maruti Suzuki India Limited from July 2008 to March 2013. He has the honor of receiving top titles like Best CEO and Champion of Champions on different occasions. Mr. Ayukawa is also the President Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers, SIAM, since September 2020. Mr. Varun Chaudhary, Managing Director, CG Corp Global. Dr. Varun Chaudhary is the Managing Director of CG Corp Global, a multinational conglomerate from Nepal with a legacy of over 150 years. He is the youngest tycoon of the first and only billionaire family from Nepal. He is the chieftain of one of the largest segments of CG Corp Global. Its FMCG vertical, CG Foods, produces the iconic noodle brand Vai Vai. His commitment towards building an empire of value that carries Nepal to the world has made him a global business icon in many countries. He has been honored by several awards for his incredible work, the most recent honor being conferred by Dainik Jagran at their Icon of North Bengal Award Conference 2022. Mr. Rajesh Nath, Managing Director, VDMA India Services Private Limited, German Engineering Federation. Mr. Nath has more than 32 years of experience working in various industries in Germany and India. He has been accorded the Cross of the Order of Merit, highest civilian award from the German president for promoting Indo-German trade in the engineering sector. And last but not the least, Ms. Akiko Yamane, partner, Foreign Enterprise Group, MBG Corporate Services. Ms. Yamane has been associated with MBG Corporate Services for over 15 years, extensively engaging with various advisory, including M&A, restructuring in complex cross-border issue resolutions, and support for inbound and outbound investment by MNCs, including large Japanese corporates. She has addressed multiple seminars in India, UAE, and Japan on diversified topics. Her rich overseas business experience led to the success of bringing billions of dollars of investments from Japan to India or other countries. A very warm welcome to each one of you. I would now like to invite Ms. Akiko Yamane to moderate the panel discussion on industry outlook on India budget. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Pallavi. And thank you. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining today's panel discussion organized by Economic Times and MBG. The government of India announced its budget every year, and the budget 2022 was announced on 1st of February. The budget estimates that India's GDP for the year 2022-23 will be around 8 to 8.5%, and fiscal deficit is estimated to be 6.54% of the GDP. This budget is being termed as a simple document providing blueprint to steer the Indian economy for the next 25 years, from India at 75 to India at 100. Post its independence in the year of 1947. It is also being considered as a progressive and a development-focused budget with a clear long-term vision of sustainable growth, better business environment, and offers many new opportunities to several businesses. The budget has been presented in the backdrop of outbreak of COVID for the past 2 successive years, where globally economies are witnessing decline in their economic growth and expansions. So now I'd like to ask every panelist that how does everyone look at it? I'd like to request everyone to give us the key takeaways of budget for the industry sector. First, Mr. Ayukawa, may I request you to give us your insight for the automotive sector?
Thank you, Yamada-san. Namaskar, everybody. My name is Kenichi Ayukawa. I'm the MD and the CEO of Maruti Suzuki Limited, India Limited. Thank you for inviting me to this panel discussion and seeking our views on the Union Budget 2022-23. First of all, I would like to compliment the government for a growth-oriented and Capex-focused budget. For the 100th year of independence, which is 2047, the government has set out a grand vision of making the Indian economy stronger and sustainable. There are some major announcements on Capex and the infrastructure in the budget, which will benefit the auto sector. These include 35% increase in capital expenditure, 25,000 kilometers of national highway, 100 cargo terminals, Project Gati Shakti, 5G telecom network, optic fiber cable lane, etc. Especially the push toward the modern, clean, and green technology will benefit the automobile industry through initiatives like charging infrastructure for EV, energy storage system, R&D support for clean energy, green mobility, and semiconductor. Secondly, I'm happy that the budget talks about use of biomass in the thermal power plant and ethanol blending in fuel. Such initiative will help the environment and also promote rural economy. Finally, the budget intended to encourage development of special mobility zone and battery swapping policy. While we are waiting for the detail of these, the automobile industry will be happy to participate and support the government in the detailed policy making. Thank you.
So, Mr. Nath, could you please share some insight from a German manufacturing perspective? I believe most manufacturers in Germany are imbibing new technologies to create the new edge.
Thank you. A very good question, Mrs. Yamani. Let me just say a few words on the budget first, Mrs. Yamani. I think if you look at the budget 22-23, Union Budget 22-23, one could say in a way it is continuation of the budget that was presented in 2021. Now, if we see the last 2 years, actually, I think for the first time in history of manufacturing, you had supply was impacted, demand was impacted, and workforce was impacted. So I think never has it happened before that all three aspects were impacted. And what made it very different, it was not only an impact in a particular region or a country, but it was a global impact that hit us. So certainly the budget should also be viewed with the aspect that we have come out of very difficult times. As we know, with the impact of the COVID in India, our GDP contracted by around 7.3% last year. Now, India had a very strong recovery. After the first lockdown, we had a very strong, almost a V-shaped recovery. Then we got again hit by the second wave. And due to that, again, the economy took a hit. However, after the second wave, I think again, we have seen a very strong recovery, and that talks about the resilience of the Indian industry. So what was required? There was a lot of expectation from this budget. We were coming out of this pandemic. There are state elections that are happening in 5 states. So how would the finance minister do the balancing act? In that way, I must say it has been a very pragmatic, a very balanced budget, where all the important aspects, we were looking at growth, we are looking at job creation, and we are looking at government spending. So all three aspects in some way or the other have been captured in this budget. And I would say it is a growth-oriented budget. As the earlier speakers have also mentioned, the spending in infrastructure, that is certainly going to boost the Indian economy, because if we see our last 2 years, actually it has been the government spending that has really helped to propel the GDP growth in India. And with the continuation of this government spending, I think this gives a lot of confidence as well as possibility the core sectors, for example, when we are talking about infrastructure development, the core industries, cement industry, steel industry, capital goods industry, all will be benefited by the spending. So I think it augurs very well for the Indian economy. And looking at the perspective from Germany or the foreign investors now, I think certainly if you look at the PLI schemes, the Indian government came with the production-linked incentive schemes. And this budget has also enhanced, especially when we are talking about the solar cell modules. Almost, I think, 19.5 thousand crores have been allocated for this. So the PLI will help to develop the manufacturing industry in India. If you look at the history, actually, India has leapfrogged from being an agrarian society to a service industry. Somewhere the manufacturing part got missed out in our development. And with the Make in India 1, now you can say Make in India 2.0, manufacturing has been given importance. And this is very important because we are looking at the contribution of manufacturing to the GDP of our country increasing from 17% up to 25%. And this is very important if India has to become a $5 trillion by 2025 or 26. So I think for the German industry, also for the German companies, they are looking at India with optimism. And I would just like to end with, we had done a business climate survey, Mr. Yamani, and you'll be happy to know that in this business climate survey, 96% of the respondents showed confidence in the Indian market, in the Indian development, in the policies of the government. And in fact, the growth of the German companies in 2021 on an average has been 19%. And the forecast for 2022 is 13%. This was the status in October. So I think the German industry is very upbeat and very optimistic about the potential and the future in India. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all the interesting thoughts. So the next one, Mr. Ayukawa, Maruti Suzuki is one of the most successful foreign companies in India, and your organization is a pioneer. So what is the plan going forward, and how other companies in Japan especially are looking at India from the investor's perspective?
Thank you very much, good word and also highly evaluated for our company. It is very difficult to talk about the individual company, the business decision, but I will try to give you a general view. Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, has a grand vision and ambition for India. Policy stability and long-term vision gives confidence to investors. I think this government has made a clear choice for favor of building long-term strength using investment and infrastructure at the growth level. For promoting manufacturing in India, government has already launched various PLI schemes along with a special scheme for manufacturing of semiconductors. Such initiatives should bring more investment in manufacturing, including the automobile sector. Also, Honorable Prime Minister announced net zero carbon emission by 2070. For this, work has to start today. I think a clear roadmap for achieving this object will give new opportunity for investors to participate in clean and green energy initiative in India. All these are positive signals that investors from any geography will notice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So what about Mr. Chaudhary? What is the future plan for the group in India?
We have quite a robust plan. Like I said, we've been growing in India year on year about 30%, and we've been expanding our factories all over India, and we've also been adding capacities year on year all over India. So we have about 13 plants in 7 different locations at the moment, and we continue to grow in terms of, like I said, adding our factories. But now what we're also doing is just, we were doing noodles all along all this while, but now we are diversifying into newer categories. So we're doing a lot of brand extension. Let's say we're getting into the sauces, the pastas, the seasonings, the whole range, and probably more sort of categories within the FMCG domain. So that's been our focus, and we are on point on that. Apart from that, we are also growing now and looking at the infrastructure and the real estate sector. We feel that the time has come, and this is the right time for us to enter this sector as well. And that's going to be probably the next upcoming sector for the group. So these are the two sectors which I'm focusing in. And in addition to, in fact, my foods business, we also have a mega food park in Rajasthan. So, growing in the processing sector, the food processing sector, and probably the backward integration of our current business in the agro sector, that's also going to be one of the domains and focus for me going forward.
Thank you. Mr. Nath, German companies are having substantial numbers of investment in India, and your organization represents them. So how German companies or investors are looking at in India?
Right. Actually, as you correctly mentioned, Germany has invested more than, or the German companies have invested more than $13 billion in the, if you look at the period 2020 to 2000 to 2021. And we have something like around 1,700 German companies operating in India. As VDMA, we are the Association of the German Machinery and Plant Manufacturers. And the bilateral trade among the two countries, India and Germany, is just over 20 billion euros. Now, what is important is that the engineering sector constitutes almost 1/3 of this trade. And when we look at export of German machinery to India, it is roughly to the tune, you could say, probably in 21, we will reach about 3 billion euros. And when we look at Indian engineering exports, this has been also rising. And I think this is a very good sign, because it talks about, this is a true concept of bilateral relationship. So we are seeing a very healthy growth also of Indian exports in engineering sector going to Germany. And in fact, this has been rising at a rate of almost 14 to 15% year on year. Of course, 2020 and 21, we have seen a slight dip. And I think this is where there is a lot of potential also for the local industry, the domestic industry in India. Because when foreign companies, any nations come to India, they are also looking at a good supplier base. And I think that is what the German companies have also done here. They have developed a good supply chain, a good supplier network in India. And this is what the companies are also looking to strengthen as they go ahead. I still remember when maybe about 2 decades back, when I started with PDMA, the questions from the German companies used to be, why do we need to come to India? Now it is no more a question of why do we need to come, but how fast can we come to India, and where should we establish ourselves in India? And we have seen, I think, over the years also a very healthy development. We saw the companies first coming in more with the sales and service offices. Then it got converted into assembly, now manufacturing. And from the VDMA members, those are the engineering companies in the technology sector, I would say almost 250 companies are manufacturing, are full-scale, large-scale manufacturing in India. And I think the German companies are very optimistic about the growth potential in India. And going ahead, I'm sure we will see much more investments coming from Germany to India. But also the other way around, I see a very good potential for Indian companies also to establish themselves in Germany, because Germany is the largest trading partner within the European Union for India. and is a good gateway for the Indian companies who are looking to do business in Europe. So I think we are very optimistic and of a very healthy bilateral trade between India and Germany. And I think this will be further strengthened as we come out of the pandemic and as India grows with the growth of at least, we are talking about for next year, the government has envisaged 8 to 8.5% growth. So I think also for the year ahead, World Bank has forecasted about 7 to 7.5% growth. So I think the India growth story is certainly going to be sustained in the future also. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As everyone knows that COVID impacted last 2 years globally, and this pandemic has strained global supply chains, causing freight backlogs that have driven up costs. While some companies are moving their manufacturing towards the customer base, Mr. Ayukawa, post-COVID, was your organization impacted by COVID, including the supply chain? How did it affect your plan?
Yes, Yamada-san. We faced a lot of difficulty past 2 years. Automotive supply chain is very long and complex with global linkage. We have hundreds of the big and thousands of small suppliers spread in multiple tiers. During COVID, on one hand, we have to ensure safety and the health of our people. And on the other hand, we have to maintain continuity of production in our factories and entire value chain. This requires a detailed study and alignment with dynamic government protocols. Considering our responsibility towards the nation, we also worked with a small-scale oxygen PSA plant manufacturer to scale up to their production capacity by over 10 times. One of the global fallout of COVID situation has been the shortage of electronic components and shipping containers. We are working hard to maximize production despite these constraints. In automotive manufacturing in India, we recognize that there is a gap in electronic manufacturing. If there is an opportunity, we would definitely like to localize electronic parts of the car in India. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chaudhary, your group company's business are quite diversified, including food business, hospitality, and banking finances. But what was the impact?
So we all know that the hospitality sector did take a beating, and we are still coming out of it. But let me speak more on the food sector. Like what my friend Mr. Ayukawa also mentioned, that first and foremost was the safety of our people, the safety of our employees. So that has always been the ethos. Yes, the safety of the employees. So we did continue our manufacturing during the COVID, and we did see a high surge during COVID in the overall consumption of the FMCG sector. But one of the pitfalls also, which I want to highlight, is the input cost certainly has gone up. While the MRP has obviously remained constant, and this MRP has remained constant for years on years now. So the rise of the input cost is something which has sharply impacted the bottom line. And this is something which all of us have to keep an eye on. And this is something which we, on a daily basis, we have to go on working on how to manage our margin. So this has become the biggest possible task for the people of our group, for the various departments in our group, to see how margin pressures are managed. So this has been one of the impact, or let's say effects of COVID, because one of the sources of or one of the raw materials is palm oil, and we all know the situation of the price of palm oil globally.
So, Mr. Nath, how do you see German companies? Did COVID affect their investment decision?
I think I would not say it has affected the investment decision, but I think a very interesting development we have seen during the COVID period especially when we look at the development of the German companies here in India. In fact, I would say it started a little before COVID hit us. And I think it's a very good development, while this will lead to a lot of job generation in India. So in fact, many of the German companies now are looking to make Indian operations as their center of excellence. So that means they are looking to produce certain machinery here in India. So this type of machinery will be manufactured only in India and will be supplied to their global operations or to their other subsidiaries throughout the globe. And I think this is a very good step, because not only does this strengthen the presence, domestic presence of the German companies here in India or their Indian subsidiaries, but I think it helps to develop the whole ecosystem of supply chain, which is what actually the government is also looking at. And I think one of the good endeavors of the government is also, as I mentioned earlier, the production-linked incentive, because production-linked incentive scheme looks to strengthen the domestic manufacturing in India. It is looking at attracting foreign investors to come in India. And the third important aspect is it will help India's contribution in the global value chain. Because at present, actually, our contribution to the global value chain is quite low. And for India really to move up the ladder from basic manufacturing, if you are looking at, we need to enhance our global value chain. And with the possibility of exports, producing good products, quality products in India, you are able to export these products. And I think this will give a good value also to the Indian manufacturers. And I think that's why the German companies looking at a strategy of, say, China +1, where this +1 can actually be India. They are looking to increase their sourcing in India, to strengthen their local operations in India. And in a way, I think this will help also in a better development of the whole ecosystem, as well as creating new job opportunities in India. And maybe I would like to end on one more point, is the skill development. We have been talking about skill development in India. Skill India has been one of the initiatives of the Indian government. And we have seen also, I'm sure Mr. Ayukawa will also agree, that India needs good skilled manpower. And the automotive sector, for example, has been very progressive in this. They have been proactive. But some of the other engineering sectors still need to catch up on this. And I think this is where actually the German companies have really taken a lot of initiatives on their own to skill their manpower and to take even students, to skill them and then to recruit these students. And I think this is very important for India's manufacturing growth, because when we are talking about more complex manufacturing processes, we are talking about more automation coming into the country, we are talking about Industry 4.0 coming into the country. So for all this, you need to have better skilled manpower. And I think this is really where the contribution of the German companies have been immense in the manufacturing ecosystem in India. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nath. So COVID made us realize new opportunities and highlight the improvement area. But for how organization is recovering from the COVID and addressing the post-COVID situations, Mr. Ayukawa, if you could hear from Maruti Suzuki, how the company is tackling with it.
Yeah, as of now, I wish the third wave of COVID in India has just gone, but the future is still uncertain. Supply side challenge like semiconductor shortage, and as Mr. Chaudhary mentioned, high raw material price has increase our cost of production. Because of this, we have taken a hit on our profit. We have only passed on some calculated price increase to the customer. Semiconductor, I hope and wish semiconductor situation is improving month on month. On high steel prices in the union budget, Honorable Finance Minister has announced some specific custom duty related measure. We hope this supply side challenge is out soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ayukawa. What about Mr. Chaudhary?
Right. So I did cover a bit in my last answer in terms of the post-COVID situation. The biggest challenge all of us have is margin management. So there is no second thought about it. Also, we've seen that market has corrected post-COVID. It's also because of the rise in input costs. So the challenge for all of us, be it any sector, like how Ayukawa-san also confirmed that, even in his sector, the semiconductor possibly availability, sourcing, or prices which has gone up. So in every sector in the economy is impacted in some way or the other. So we somehow have to ride the storm and come out of it. When we will come out of it, we don't know.
Thank you very much. So how German companies are reacting to it, Mr. Nath?
Yeah, I would agree with my earlier speakers, Mr. Ayukawa as well as Varun, on the challenges that have really impacted India and the Indian industry due to the COVID. I think we have faced different challenges in each of the waves. In the first wave, of course, it was something that hit us. Nobody knew what COVID was all about. And because of the lockdown, there was actually very difficult for movement of man or machine or material. It was very difficult and there were a lot of uncertainties also. Then we had, unfortunately, also the people going back to the villages. So workforce was impacted. It took some time for the workforce to come back to the factories. Then the second wave hit us, and that time we were at least more aware about what the impact would be. And luckily, unlike the first wave, India did not have a total lockdown as we had in the first wave. So the second wave, there were more the regional lockdowns. So companies were prepared for this. But I think let's take one or two, what have been the big takeaways or impact of COVID? I think especially when we talk about the engineering or manufacturing industry, the whole concept of work from home was not at all relevant or prevalent in the manufacturing industry. It is something new that we are now faced with. And in fact, now we have emerged from work from home to a more hybrid structure, where there is some people are working, the factory, the workers are on the shop floor, but certain operations, maybe finance or administration, they are not fully coming to office or coming on a rotational basis. So I think especially for the engineering industry, this was a big paradigm shift with this work from home or this hybrid structure. But the 2 years have actually shown us that this hybrid module also works well for the engineering industry. Then, of course, I think the second biggest impact what we are seeing is the whole concept of automation. Now, with COVID coming into the country and impacting the business, actually this has given a boost to automation, because not only the large companies, but even the smaller companies like the MSMEs. And Mrs. Yamani, India has actually 63.3 million MSMEs in India. So it's a huge number of mid-sized companies, smaller companies, and 99% of them employ less than 10 people. So I think the shift also has been, earlier we were only talking about automation being relevant for the larger companies, but now we are also seeing the MSMEs actually looking at adopting automation. And I think this is one of the biggest trigger or impact of COVID, is that the whole country, I think, would get a boost in automation. And we have also seen endeavors of the government in this budget also. There is a focus on 5G technology. There is a focus on digitization that is coming into the country. In fact, the Indian government has itself set up the Center of Excellence, 4 centers of excellence in India for Industry 4.0. And I think these are all steps to make Indian manufacturing more resilient, more robust, and more quality conscious. And this will really help in development of the manufacturing industry in India, including the MSMEs, which so much need the support, especially in the COVID period. And I think the government has really given a lot of focus in the budget on the MSME sector. And they are the backbone of the Indian economy and the Indian manufacturing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Of course, work from home may not be the first options for the manufacturing companies. However, I understood that many companies are trying to adopt, including the automations. So lastly, what do you look forward to from the government in terms of policies and reforms for their respective business sectors in the future, whether it's ecosystem, infrastructures, or specific incentives to pull manufacturing in greater numbers? So Mr. Aikawa, please.
Yes, Mr. Yamada-san, the auto industry has had a slow growth in the past few years because of the high input costs and the increasing regulation. Automobile industry is a major contributor to the economy in India and generate huge employment for the masses. Therefore, if automobile industry grows, it will possibly support the economic activity. We will continue to discuss with the government how to jointly help the industry grow and benefit the Indian economy, environment, and society. One way could be jointly developing a long-term and stable policy roadmap for the industry. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. What about the food industry, Mr. Chaudhary?
Yes, so even our industry is a very employment-centric industry. We ourselves employ close to 5,000 people in India. So with again, I'm repeating, I think with the cost which we've seen rising, that's something that needs to be kept on check, or that has to be monitored quite closely. And also in terms of when, or let's say, we can't predict, for how many more months we will see this phenomena. But probably even, let's say, some of the other industry colleagues also, I was reading a couple of weeks back, they were also talking about, because of such a high input cost, they were also looking at price rise. So if we are not left with any option, and if we continue to see the margin and the pressure, so I would probably welcome my industry colleagues to probably, see how we can move forward together. What are the options we have, in the best possible way.
Thank you. And Mr. Nath?
Yes, I think from a foreign company's perspective, what do they look at actually when anybody is either operating in India or looking to come to India? Well, some of the basic criteria you're looking at ease of doing business. Now, I think India has done quite well. We have jumped almost 80 positions in the ease of doing business. And before, I think the last ranking was about 63rd. So we have really done very well on the ease of doing business. And this year budget also, Mrs. Yamani speaks of ease of doing business 2.0. So there is a lot of thrust or emphasis from the government side on ease of doing business. Secondly, you're looking at regularized taxation policy. And I think that has again also been covered by the government in this budget, because the policies, it should not vary each year to year. As it is, the Indian taxation is very complex for foreign companies to follow, especially German companies to follow. But of course, with the implementation of GST, this has been a big booster, as well as continuation of the tax policies. I think that is very important. And largely, I think this has also been done by the government. And in fact, it has been quite well. The government is looking at attracting investment as well as continuing the policies, the taxation policies. However, I would like to touch upon a couple of points what we would look at the government also to do. And I think one, of course, is I would like to highlight the EU-India Free Trade Agreement. Now, this has been in discussion for many years. And during the visit of Honorable Prime Minister to Germany last time, there was a talk on restarting the discussion for the free trade agreement. And I think it is high time now that EU as well as India undertakes the discussion in a more active manner so that we can look at closure of this free trade agreement, which has been in discussion for a long time. Last point I would like to touch is that history has shown that any country thrives when there is an open market. So I think open market is a very important criteria for development of trade amongst any countries. And with the rationalization, we are talking about rationalization of custom duty. Actually, you are trying to close the market, which I think Indian government perhaps has to relook. Of course, protecting the interest of the domestic companies, MSMEs, is very important, but also opening the trade routes for bigger trades, because that is where actually the bilateral trades, the growth of the country can happen. So I think this would be my wish list, that maybe the government looks at these aspects also. But overall, I think we are certainly on the right track, and especially the endeavors of the government in ease of doing business, as they call, we are talking about, they call this term they have been using, trust-based governance. I think this is very important, that we are talking about trust-based governance. And for the development of the foreign companies in India and to attract more foreign investment, I think this is very important, and full compliments to the Indian government for this very progressive and I think a very futuristic budget. As was mentioned also, we are looking at a roadmap or a time map for the next 25 years. I think this is really a very progressive outlook of the Indian government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting and informative session, and it was really a good opportunities to interact and hear from the industry experts. So with this, we end the panel discussion. Thank you very much, Mr. Ayukawa, Mr. Chaudhary, Mr. Nat, for your participations. Now I'd like to hand over to Ms. Pallavi.
Thank you, Ms. Yamane, for holding the fort. Big thanks to all the gentlemen for sharing their insights on the budget. With this, we come to the end of the program. Really appreciate everyone present here for their time, despite their busy schedules. Thank you for joining us. Thanks a lot.